Well, Loyola Marymount professor Fernando Guerra joins us now to help us sort it all out. And we want to start with the security clearances. Do you remember any other instance where a president pulled security clearances from his critics?
Well, I don't remember any instance. I am sure that many presidents would wanted to have done that, but have not done that because of constraints, both internal and external constraints. External constraints meaning Congress. You know, he has a difficult time with this type of thing. The president has no constraints, but that's what his supporters like, and that's what his critics dislike. You know, there are many clearances that have been pulled, I am sure, but they're usually done in a very systematic fashion, and this not in terms of a political whim. Now, what is dangerous about this is for two folds. Number one, it's just the continuing authoritarian thinking that's going on in Washington, meaning that if you don't think like me, you're not going to speak on behalf of government, and that's dangerous. And number two, the lesson of 9/11. The 9/11, that terrorist attack of New York that killed 3,000 Americans, it was a failure of intelligence because of groupthink. There were actually intelligence officers who thought differently and were actually warning about the possibility, but because of groupthink, it wasn't allowed to percolate. Since then, the intelligence community has tried to change its culture to try to create a more diverse set of thinking. This is going against that, and I think is quite dangerous.
Now let's shift to the Paul Manafort trial. Of course, jurors have deliberated for 2 days now. They went home for the weekend. They'll be back at it again on Monday. If there is a guilty verdict, Professor, what does that mean for President Trump? Oh,
it just means the heat is truly turned up. The White House will clearly say, hey, that had nothing to do with Trump. It's about all of the things that he did. But nonetheless, this comes on top of other guilty not verdicts, but pleas such as Flynn. And you see that it will embolden Mueller to continue the pressure. Even though this case has really nothing to do with the campaign or the administration, it shows and communicates to the American people that all the people around Trump, like Flynn and now Manafort, were corrupt or had corrupt intentions. And this will be proven in a court of law, not a court of public opinion, but in a court of law. They'll say his campaign manager was a corrupt individual.
But if Manafort is acquitted, how does that really change the narrative coming from the White House? Oh,
I mean, that completely changes the narrative. And actually, I think it changes the course of the Mueller investigation. Again, you saw in that tape the president continuously saying, no collusion here, no witch hunt. If he gets convicted, they'll say it has nothing to do with Trump and the campaign. If he gets acquitted, they're going to say, look, this shows that there's no collusion, number one. It shows that this is a witch hunt. In a very objective manner, we pulled out the facts, and an unbiased set of people, the jury, said there was nothing wrong here. The narrative changes completely. And if Mueller cannot convict someone with this amount of evidence, he's going to be hard-pressed to press further charges with even less evidence. I cannot imagine him having more evidence on anybody else than the evidence that was shown here in terms of Mueller. I'm talking about the paper trail, not the opinions.
Now let's shift to the Amarosa tapes, because we're hearing that she might have at least 200 taped conversations during her time in the White House. I guess my question here, Professor, is twofold. First of all, was it legal for her to make all of these recordings in the White House? And secondly, in the battle of public opinion between President Trump and Amarosa, who wins?
Well, Trump wins. I mean, Trump is the master of winning that. I'm actually a little bit surprised. I know he can't help himself that he would take on Amarosa. I thought he would just ignore her. By ignoring her, you take away oxygen from her. And so he has much more control of the narrative, but she's obviously changing the news. And, you know, what's I think what gets under his skin is that she is very much like him, going toe to toe, she has no shame, and so she's willing to pursue all kinds of different objectives. You know, on the other hand, she's already won. She's selling books. We're talking about her.
Right.
And at first I thought, okay, she's just going to be a footnote. But all these other tapes, she might continue to stay in the news.
And these tapes you think are legal?
That's a good question. Depends on the individual situations. In D.C., it's not necessarily against the law to tape somebody unknowingly. However, in terms of the White House, that could be very different. Amarosa has won and met her objective, and having a very strong African-American woman going toe-to-toe to the president is something very powerful. I am sure that there are women today thinking about naming their daughters Amarosa. I would have considered it. My father's name was Omar, and Omarosa would have been great for my daughter.
All right, Professor, thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your insight.